Hey guys, what's up? Booksmarts here, and today we're doing another Zero to Hero guide. This guide is for the Balanced Druid, and we'll be taking a look at talents, gear, stat prio, rotations, and playstyles for single target raid encounters, cleave raid encounters, and Mythic Plus. First up is talents. Balanced Druids have access to two hero talent trees, Elun's Chosen and Keeper of the Grove. Elun's Chosen focuses on buffing Moonfire, Starfire, Fury of Elun, and other lunar abilities, whereas Keeper of the Grove focuses on empowering your treants. Keeper of the Grove is only 1 to 2% worse than Elun's Chosen, but it's considerably easier to play. As a result, Keeper of the Grove is the default choice for raid encounters, and Elun's Chosen is the preferred choice for Mythic Plus. For single target raid fights, namely Sikrin and Kai Veza, you'll want to run with this build on screen. On the class tree side, we run a fairly default build, opting out of some weaker options such as Heart of the Wild and Nature's Vigil, allowing us to pick up talents that smooth out our gameplay and give us some defensive bonuses. On the spec tree side, we run Force of Nature for single target, and we take Convoke, although we don't take its bonus talent, Elun's Guidance. We also steer away from Fury of Elun and single target, opting for more damage on our dots and single target abilities. For any raid encounters with 2 or more targets, we run a fairly similar build. On the class tree side, we pick up Improved Sunfire, Matted Fur, and Typhoon, giving us some more utility and AoE damage. On the spec tree side, we're still staying away from Fury of Elun, but we pick up some AoE talents like Aetherial Kindling and Sunspeaker Mushroom to help boost our AoE damage. For Mythic Plus, things change quite a bit. Our hero talent tree changes from Keeper of the Grove to Elun's Chosen, so our lunar abilities become much more important. On the class tree side, we forego some quality of life talents such as Fluid Form and Innervate for more group CC and defensiveness via Incapacitating War and our Dispel, Remove Corruption. And on the spec tree side, we lean all the way into buffing our Moonfires, Starfires, Starfalls, and anything else moon related. We pick up Fury of Elun and its bonus talent for extra damage and completely forego Convoke. We also trade out Force of Nature for Warrior of Elun for even more lunar damage. This build is fantastic for allowing us to get dots out on a group, then pop cooldowns and just destroy groups with Fury of Elun and Starfire and Starfall spam. Moving on to gear and stat prio. On screen now is a breakdown of stat weights for Raid and Mythic Plus. The main point of gear is to buff our stats, and the stats we're looking for on a Balanced Druid are Mastery and Haste. Crit and Verse aren't useless to us, but we want to actively try to get only Mastery and Haste, and as much of it as possible. More so Mastery. If we end up DRing on both stats, our leftover will go into Crit as it's slightly better than Verse, but once again, Crit and Verse do not compare to Haste or especially Mastery. Intellect is still extremely valuable, so more often than not, eye level will be king, but always sim your character to find out what the best items and upgrades for your character are. This season, our gear choices are pretty easy due to some of the power of the non-tier pieces, namely the neck from Sikrin, the ring from Queen, and the back from Rashinan. There are also quite a few trinkets this season, some boasting crazy stat gains, while others do massive upfront damage. As Balanced Druids, our best 2 simming trinkets are Treacherous Transmitter and Spymaster's Web. Both are on use, so if you prefer not to use 2 on-use trinkets, Arkar's Sackbrood is the best passive trinket for us and another good option. The way I would recommend using your 2 on-use trinkets is to use your Spymasters with your 1-minute cooldown, so you'll guaranteed get a little stat boost, and to use Transmitter with your 2-minute cooldowns, which will give you a pretty large stat boost. And this is subject to change depending on the encounter. For instance, if I were doing a Mythic Plus key, say a Mists, I would Transmitter the first pack and save my Spymasters all the way until the first boss, so I had a huge stat boost waiting for me during the damage phase. Shown on screen now is a preview of the best in slot for a Balanced Druid in single target and AoE, provided no items are crafted. Speaking of crafted items, let's talk about that for a minute. Craftable items have been made some of the most powerful items in the game, and combined with the right embellishments, can actually become stronger than our best options, depending on what item you craft. Balanced Druids want their first crafted item to be the Vagabond's Torch Offhand, with the Darkmoon Sigil Ascension embellishment. If you don't have a strong weapon by the time you're able to craft a weapon, the 2-hand staff is just fine, but know that the Vagabond's Torch is best in slot. Your second crafted item should be for your waist, the Rune Banded Waistband with the Writhing Armor Banding embellishment. If you manage to get both your main hand and offhand best in slot at 639, you still want to make and keep the Vagabond Torch offhand equipped, as the Ascension buff actually outweighs the extra 3 item levels worth of buffs from your offhand bis. And since we're talking about embellishments, we'll also touch on gems, enchants, and consumables. Shown on screen now are the recommended enchants, consumables, and gems for a balanced druid. Feel free to pause here while you get your information, and we're moving on. Moving on to the playstyle and rotation. Balanced druids have a very simple rotation that's built around builders and spenders and the Eclipse minigame. So balanced druids mainly have 2 types of spells, right? Sun spells, or solar spells, and moon spells, or lunar spells. When you cast solar spells, it makes you enter a lunar eclipse, and when you cast lunar spells, you'll enter a solar eclipse. When you're in an eclipse, spells of that type do more damage. For example, when you enter a solar eclipse, your Wrath and Sunfire do more damage, and when you enter a lunar eclipse, Starfire and Moonfire do more damage. An eclipse lasts for 15 seconds, and after it ends, casting 2 Wraths forces a lunar eclipse, or casting 2 Starfires forces a solar eclipse. The back and forth can be kinda confusing for some, so let's break it down. We'll start with the basics, then build from there. Balanced druids have 2 main builder spells, one sun spell called Wrath, and one moon spell called Starfire. Wrath is a single target ability, whereas Starfire hits the target and everyone close to it. Balanced druids also have 2 dots, Sunfire and Moonfire, and these need to stay on all the targets all the time. Moonfire and Sunfire generally hit only 1 target at a time, but with talents, Moonfire hits 2 targets, and Sunfire hits all targets around the target. Finally, balanced druids have 2 spenders, Star Surge and Starfall. Both of these abilities are astral abilities, which means that they count as solar and lunar abilities, and whenever solar or lunar abilities get buffed, your astral abilities also get buffed. During times when your solar and lunar abilities are buffed, your astral abilities get double buffed, which is really nice. Star Surge does a blast of single target damage, and Starfall does damage over time to all enemies in a 45-yard radius around your character, which is massive. A lot of our damage comes from dots, so I want to take a second to talk about dynamic dots versus snapshot dots and the pandemic mechanic. So when we place out our dots, they're going to tick for, let's say, 18 seconds. Now over the course of that 18 seconds, you might get buffed, buffs might run out, you might get a proc, you might pop Bloodlust or a trinket. There's tons of opportunities to gain or lose stats throughout the course of a dot. Dynamic dots will calculate how much damage they're supposed to do in real time. So if you gain a big buff, you don't have to refresh your dot for the buff to apply and for you to receive the extra damage. It updates in real time. Conversely, snapshot dots will take a mental snapshot of your buffs at the moment you apply the dot, and will keep those buffs on the dot until the dot either runs out or is replaced. This is good to know because if you're in your cooldown window and you've got a bunch of buffs and extra damage and you use the snapshot dot, it's very important that you don't update that dot or refresh it, because you're going to lose out on all the buffs and damage that you would have gotten by not refreshing it. So that's the difference between snapshot dots and dynamic dots. And we mentioned the pandemic mechanic earlier, which is pretty simple. If you have a dot that lasts for 18 seconds, and you refresh it when there is 30% or less of the dot remaining, in this case 6 seconds, that refresh time will be added to the new dot, turning an 18-second dot into potentially a 24-second dot. This is important to know because you don't have to wait until a dot falls off to refresh it in order to be 100% efficient. You can reapply a dot as long as it has less than 30% of the time remaining, and you won't lose any damage for it. Luckily for us, all of our dots are dynamic dots at the moment, but it's best to know this information just in case anything changes in the future. So for the rotation, we want to keep both of our dots on the target, or all of the targets in the area, then use Wrath or Starfire to build your resource called Astral Power, and Star Surge or Starfall to spend our Astral Power. In single target situations, you want to use 2 Starfires to enter a solar eclipse so your Wrath and Star Surges hit harder. And in AoE situations, you want to use 2 Wraths to enter a lunar eclipse so that your Starfires and your Starfalls hit harder. For switching from single target to AoE, the general rule of thumb is to use AoE abilities when there are 3 or more targets, and if you're in your Celestial Alignment window, this number increases to 4 or more targets. For extra abilities, there aren't too many things to factor in for balanced druids, but let's quickly talk about them. Force of Nature is a talent that we take in raid encounters, and it synergizes well with our Keeper of the Grove hero tree. On a 45-second cooldown, you summon 3 treants that attack things in an area, and as long as they're up, you can deal more damage. 8% more treant for up to 24% more damage. You definitely want to be using this on cooldown, and it's actually worth holding CDs for a few seconds to make sure that this lines up with them. For Elun's chosen players, Warrior of Elun is taken instead of Force of Nature. It's also on a 45-second cooldown, and Warrior of Elun just makes your next 3 Starfires instant and generate 30% more astral power. A great ability off the GCD that lets you get a little bit more damage in your cooldown window, but if there's less than 7 seconds left in your current eclipse, wait on the next eclipse to make use of it. Next we have Fury of Elun, also mainly for Elun's chosen players. On a 1-minute cooldown, this ability just calls down a moonbeam on a target that does AoE damage over 8 seconds.
The last thing we need to factor in are our cooldowns, Convoke the Spirits and Celestial Alignment. Convoke the Spirits is on a 2-minute cooldown, and over the course of 4 seconds, your character casts 16 Druid spells. These spells are mostly random, but they prefer to cast spells based on what shapeshift form you're in, so you want to make sure you're always in Moonkin form when you cast this. Due to both the lack of talent points and the bursty and erratic nature of this cooldown, it's currently only being taken in Raid. And one other note about this spell, since it will almost guaranteed be casting both lunar and solar spells, you want to try and use it during a time when you have both a lunar and solar eclipse. And the only way to do that is through our other major cooldown, Celestial Alignment. Celestial Alignment is also on a 2-minute cooldown and gives you both eclipses as well as 10% haste for 15 seconds. It sounds really simple, but giving us both eclipses is a really strong buff. It supercharges our spenders and gives us the perfect window to use our Convoke. So, we know our normal rotation, we know our cooldowns, what do our openers look like?
For single target, assuming raid talents, our opener will be 2 Wraths used at max range 2 seconds before the start of the pull, into Sunfire, into Force of Nature, into Celestial Alignment. From here, we want to dump Astral Power until we have under 40, and then Convoke. After Convoke, we can assume our normal single target rotation of using Wrath to build, Star Surge to dump, and using 2 Starfires when we leave Solar Eclipse so that we can re-enter it. Going back to the opener, our Force of Nature timing is going to be really tricky. When we cast Force of Nature, we get 3 stacks of Dream Surge, which makes our next 3 builders explode for AoE damage. And all of our abilities calculate their damage when the ability lands, not when the ability is casted. As a result, sometimes, depending on how much haste we have, there might be a Wrath that's still in the air on the way to the target when we want to cast Force of Nature. If this happens and we don't have Celestial Alignment active, we want to postpone the Force of Nature cast with a Moonfire so Wrath has enough time to land so that we have all 3 charges of Dream Surge for our Celestial Alignment window. So one more time, 2 Wraths into Sunfire, into Moonfire or Force of Nature, into Celestial Alignment, then dump Astral Power until under 40, and then Convoke. Now if we're doing single target, but we're in our Mythic Plus build, say it's for a boss, things are going to change a little bit, assuming we're in Elun's Chosen. As a rule for Elun's Chosen, you only ever want to make use of lunar eclipses, and you only cast Wrath to enter back into your lunar eclipses, even in single target. As a result, for Elun's Chosen single target, you start with 2 Wraths into a Moonfire into Sunfire, you cast Warrior of Elun into Celestial Alignment. From here, cast Star Surge until you're under 40 Astral Power, then Convoke into Fury of Elun into another Astral Power dump. After the Astral Power dump, just assume your regular single target rotation, making sure to stay in lunar eclipses, making good use of your cooldowns, and not wasting Astral Power. In AoE situations, our rotation remains mostly the same regardless of our hero talents, due to lunar spells being more AoE oriented. While mobs are being gathered, we can Moonfire to get the dot on everything, and then Sunfire once it's all gathered up. From here, we pop either Warrior of Elun or Force of Nature into Celestial Alignment, where we dump Astral Power through Starfall, then Convoke, if you have it, into Fury of Elun into another Astral Power dump via Starfall. From here, we're keeping both dots on all the targets, staying in Lunar Eclipse, and building Astral Power with Starfire and dumping with Starfall. The last thing I want to talk about are some helpful weak ores. In my time playing a balanced Druid, keeping track of my Astral Power, my dots, and my cooldown timers have helped me to get the most out of my Druid, and I would highly recommend getting some weak ores to help you track whatever aspects of the spec you might find it hard to keep track of. And that is my Zero to Hero Balanced Druid guide. With your newfound knowledge, you should be able to take your Druid into keys and raid and smash like never before. If you enjoyed the guide, please subscribe or smash that like button, and feel free to leave a comment telling me what class or spec you want to see a guide for next. Alright everyone, I'm out. Take care.